The seaplane's engine roared as it skimmed the surface of the turquoise lagoon. Lily pressed her face against the window, marveling at the patchwork of coral reefs and endless blue. "This is unbelievable," she breathed, turning to Ethan, her husband of 2 weeks. Ethan grinned, his hand resting on hers. "Nothing but the best for us, Mrs. Harper." They were greeted at the jetty by staff dressed in crisp white uniforms, offering champagne and cold towels. Their overwater villa was a marvel, a sprawling deck with a private infinity pool, glass floors revealing fish swimming below, and a bed draped in sheer white curtains. Lily spun in the middle of the room, her sundress flaring. I don't think this place is real." Ethan chuckled, pulling her into his arms. "It's real, and it's ours for the next 2 weeks." Lily melted into his embrace, but as she glanced over his shoulder at the horizon, a strange restlessness stirred in her. The first few days were idyllic. They lounged by the pool, snorkeled among vibrant coral reefs, and enjoyed candlelit dinners under the stars. Ethan seemed content to soak in every moment with Lily, but Lily found herself growing restless. Ethan was a planner, meticulous to a fault. He had scheduled their days with activities, leaving little room for spontaneity. He spent mornings checking emails, while Lily gazed longingly at the endless expanse of water, yearning for a taste of adventure that didn't involve itineraries. On the third evening, as they dined at the resort's exclusive restaurant, Lily's eyes wandered to a group of men laughing boisterously near the bar. One of them caught her attention. A tall, dark-haired man with an effortless charisma that drew eyes to him. He leaned against the counter, a drink in hand, his confident grin lighting up the room. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them blurred. "Lily?" Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts. She blinked, turning back to her husband. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you wanted dessert." His tone was light, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. The following morning, Ethan left early for a deep-sea fishing excursion. Lily, feigning exhaustion, stayed behind, relishing the opportunity to explore the resort on her own. By the time she reached the infinity pool, the dark-haired stranger from the bar was already there. He sat at the edge, the sun glinting off his tanned skin as he dipped his feet into the water. "Skipping the fishing trip?" he asked, his voice smooth and playful. Lily paused, surprised that he recognized her. "You must have me confused with someone else." "Touted," he said, flashing her a grin. "You stood out last night." Lily felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I'm Lily." "Daniel," he said, offering his hand. She took it, his grip firm but lingering. "You're here alone?" she asked, seating herself on a nearby lounger. "Not exactly. Business brought me here, but I can't say no to paradise." His eyes lingered on hers. "What about you? Honeymoon, right?" She nodded. "My husband's off fishing." "Lucky guy," Daniel said, his tone suggesting something deeper. Over the next few days, Lily found herself crossing paths with Daniel more often. A smile at breakfast, a wave at the pool, a fleeting exchange near the spa. Each encounter felt charged, their conversations laced with subtle flirtation. Ethan, oblivious to the growing tension, was preoccupied with his excursions and meticulous planning. One evening, as he pored over details for a day trip to a nearby island, Lily excused herself, claiming she wanted to watch the sunset. She found Daniel waiting near the water's edge, his silhouette framed by the fading light. "Running again?" he teased, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Maybe," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. Daniel stepped closer. "You seem restless, Lily, like you're searching for something. Lily's heart pounded as he reached for her hand, his touch sending a shiver up her spine. She didn't pull away. "Daniel, don't say anything," he murmured, his lips brushing against hers. Lily's resolve crumbled as Daniel's kiss deepened, his hands pulling her closer. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive, her body tingling with a passion that had been missing. When they parted, breathless and flushed, guilt clawed at her. "I shouldn't have—" "Then why did you?" Daniel interrupted, his voice low and steady. Lily didn't have an answer. The afternoon sun streamed through the lush greenery of the resort as Lily walked toward Daniel's villa, her heart hammering in her chest. She hadn't meant for this to happen, this dangerous game they were playing, but every step toward him made her blood hum in ways she couldn't ignore. Daniel opened the door before she could knock, a knowing smile already on his face. "You're late," he teased, leaning against the doorframe in his usual casual manner, his white linen shirt unbuttoned enough to reveal the tanned expanse of his chest. "I shouldn't be here," Lily said, clutching her bag tightly. "But you are," Daniel replied, his voice soft and inviting as he stepped aside to let her in. The villa was dimly lit, the scent of ocean breeze mingling with Daniel's cologne. It felt intimate, almost suffocating. Lily hesitated in the doorway, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. This can't keep happening," she said, her voice trembling. "I love my husband." Daniel approached her slowly, his dark eyes locking with hers. "Do you?" The question hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Before Lily could respond, Daniel closed the distance between them, his hands brushing against her shoulders. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. But she didn't. She couldn't. Instead, she closed the gap, her lips meeting his in a desperate, hungry kiss. Their passion ignited quickly, their movements frantic and unrestrained. Daniel lifted her onto the edge of the counter, his hands trailing down her back as she tangled her fingers in his hair. It was intoxicating, his touch, his scent, the raw intensity of the moment. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, the weight of her actions pressed down on Lily like a physical force. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the events of the past few days. "This isn't who I am," she murmured, more to herself than to Daniel. Daniel shifted beside her, propping himself up on one elbow. "Maybe it is," he said, his voice steady. "Maybe this is the version of you that's been hiding all along." Lily turned away, her chest tightening. She wanted to believe him, but the ache of guilt was undeniable. Ethan sat on the deck of their villa, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands as he watched the horizon. The past few days had felt off. Lily had been distant, her usual warmth replaced by an almost practiced politeness. He couldn't pinpoint when the shift had started, but now it was impossible to ignore. She laughed less, avoided eye contact, and found excuses to spend time away from him. That afternoon, as he returned from a snorkeling trip, he spotted her near the spa. She was laughing, her head tilted back in that way that had always made his heart skip a beat, but it wasn't him who had made her laugh. Ethan's chest tightened as he took in the scene. Lily was standing close to a tall, dark-haired man, her body angled toward him in a way that felt far too intimate. The man reached out, his fingers brushing her arm, and Lily didn't pull away. Ethan turned abruptly, his jaw clenched. That evening, as they prepared for dinner, Ethan couldn't hold back any longer. "Where were you today?" he asked casually, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. Lily froze for a moment before replying. "At the spa." I told you I wanted to try the massage treatments." Ethan studied her, his eyes narrowing. "You seem to be spending a lot of time there." "It's relaxing," she said quickly, turning to adjust her hair in the mirror. "Is that a problem?" "No, if that's where you're actually going," Ethan said, his tone sharp. Lily's hand halted. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan didn't respond, but the tension between them was palpable. The next day, Ethan decided to test his suspicions. He told Lily he was heading out for another snorkeling trip, but doubled back toward the villa instead. As he walked through the resort's winding paths, his heart sank. He saw her again, this time at the edge of the pool. She wasn't alone. The man from the spa was with her, leaning close as they spoke. Ethan's blood boiled as he watched them. Lily's body language was unmistakable. She was laughing, her hand brushing his shoulder, her eyes locked on his. He wanted to confront her then and there, to demand answers, but something held him back. He needed to be sure. Ethan waited until Lily returned to the villa that evening. She stepped inside, her smile faltering when she saw him sitting on the couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. Lily hesitated, her heart pounding. "Is everything okay?" "Who is he?" Ethan asked, his eyes locking onto hers. Lily froze, her breath catching. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Lily," he snapped, his voice rising. "I've seen you, with him, near the pool, the spa. How long has this been going on?" Tears filled Lily's eyes. "Ethan, it's not—" "Don't insult me by pretending it's innocent," Ethan interrupted, his voice shaking. "You've been lying to me this whole time, haven't you?" Lily broke down, her sobs filling the silence. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to happen. You've destroyed everything, Lily, everything." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Ethan said, standing abruptly. "And now I don't even know who you are." Ethan stormed out of the villa, his chest heaving with anger and heartbreak. He wandered the resort aimlessly, his mind replaying Lily's betrayal over and over. Meanwhile, Lily met Daniel near the beach, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Knows?" she said, her voice trembling. Daniel frowned, his jaw tightening. "Then it's over. You don't owe him anything anymore. Come with me." Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. I don't even know who I am anymore." Before Daniel could respond, Ethan appeared, his face twisted with rage. "You!" Ethan shouted, his voice echoing across the beach. "Ethan, please," Lily began, but he cut her off. "Stay out of this," he snapped, his eyes blazing. He lunged at Daniel, his fists flying as years of love and betrayal erupted in a violent clash. The fight moved toward the jagged rocks near the water's edge, their shouts mingling with the sound of crashing waves. Ethan slipped, his foot catching on the uneven terrain, and he fell backward. His head struck the rocks with a sickening crack. "Ethan!" Lily screamed, running to his side. The moment Ethan's body hit the rocks, time seemed to stop. The sound of the waves grew distant, muffled beneath the roar in Lily's ears. She dropped to her knees, her trembling hands reaching for him. Blood trickled from a deep gash on his temple, staining the jagged rocks beneath him. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Ethan, please, wake up." Her fingers pressed against his neck, desperate to find a pulse. But there was nothing. No movement, no sign of life. The reality of what had happened began to sink in, the weight of it crushing her chest. "Help!" she screamed, her voice raw and hoarse. "Somebody, please, help!" Daniel stood a few feet away, frozen in shock. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a pale, stricken expression. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for this." "Get away from us!" Lily screamed, her tear-streaked face twisting in rage. "You've done enough!" Daniel took a step back, his hands raised as if to ward off her anger. He hesitated for a moment before turning and disappearing into the darkness, leaving Lily alone with Ethan's lifeless body. Resort staff arrived minutes later, alerted by her frantic cries. They surrounded her, their voices a blur as they tried to pull her away from Ethan, but Lily refused to let go, clinging to him as if her desperation could bring him back. The villa felt cavernous and empty when Lily returned later that night. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands still stained with Ethan's blood. The reality of what had happened, what she had done, was suffocating. She stared at their wedding photo on the nightstand, her throat tightening. It had only been 2 weeks since that day, 2 weeks since she'd stood beside Ethan, promising to love and honor him. Now he was gone, and it was her fault. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a message from Daniel. "Daniel, we need to talk." Lily's stomach turned. She threw the phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the wall echoing in the silence. The days after Ethan's death were a blur. Lily was questioned by the local authorities, her answers robotic and devoid of emotion. The resort staff had witnessed the fight between Ethan and Daniel, but no charges were filed. It was ruled an accident. When Lily returned to the mainland, she was met with a cold, unforgiving silence. Ethan's family barely acknowledged her presence at the funeral, their grief and anger palpable. "You destroyed him," Ethan's sister Kate hissed as Lily approached the casket. "He loved you, and you broke him." Lily's knees buckled, but no one reached out to steady her. Returning to their shared apartment felt like stepping into a tomb. Ethan's clothes still hung in the closet, his books were neatly stacked on the coffee table, and the faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air. Lily wandered the rooms aimlessly, her fingers trailing over the remnants of their life together. She picked up his favorite mug, a faint smile tugging at her lips before the crushing wave of guilt hit her again. Every corner of the apartment was filled with memories. The couch where they'd curled up to watch movies, the kitchen where Ethan had burned pancakes trying to surprise her with breakfast. It was unbearable. She opened their wedding album, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. Each photo was a cruel reminder of what she had destroyed. Lily stopped leaving the apartment. She ignored calls from her family and friends, unable to face their questions or their pity. The days blurred together as she drowned in her grief. Daniel tried to contact her several times, but she deleted his messages without reading them. She couldn't bear to think about him or what they had done. One night, as she sat in the darkened living room, she found herself replaying every moment of their honeymoon. She thought of Ethan's smile as he handed her a glass of champagne, his hand brushing hers, the way he had looked at her during their candlelit dinners, his eyes filled with a love she hadn't deserved. She wept until her chest ached, her cries echoing through the empty apartment. Lily found a notebook in Ethan's desk drawer, the one he'd used to jot down ideas and plans for their future. She flipped through the pages, her tears blurring his neat handwriting. At the back of the notebook was a blank page. Lily stared at it for a long time before picking up a pen. "Ethan," she began, her handwriting shaky. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for what I've done. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I loved you. I love you still, and I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life." The ink smudged as her tears fell onto the page. She didn't finish the letter. It was months before Lily finally agreed to meet Daniel. They sat in a quiet cafe, their conversation stilted and tense. "I never wanted this to happen," Daniel said, his hands clenched around his coffee cup. "I thought—" "You thought what?" Lily interrupted, her voice sharp. "That we'd ride off into the sunset together? That everything would magically work out?" Daniel looked away, his expression pained. "I didn't know how it would end." "Well, now you do," Lily said bitterly. "He's gone, and it's on us." Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I don't want to see you again," she said, standing abruptly. "Marie." "Goodbye, Daniel." On the anniversary of Ethan's proposal, Lily travelled to the cliff where he had asked her to marry him. She carried a small urn containing his ashes, her hands trembling as she approached the edge. "This is where it all began," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And this is where I'll leave you." She opened the urn, letting the wind carry Ethan's ashes into the sea below. Years passed, but Lily remained trapped in the shadow of her guilt. She moved to a small town, avoiding the places and people that reminded her of Ethan. She worked quietly, lived simply, and kept her secrets close. The memories never left her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, his love, his heartbreak, his final moments. One night, as rain battered against her window, Lily sat down to write a letter. "Ethan," she began, her tears falling freely, "I hope you found peace. I'll never forgive myself for what I did to you, but maybe now I can let you go." She folded the letter and placed it in a box along with her wedding ring. Then she extinguished the light, her apartment falling into darkness, a reflection of the life she had been left to live. Lily's days became a monotony of routine. She awoke every morning to the emptiness of her small apartment, her only companions the echoes of her past. The few personal belongings she allowed herself to keep from her life with Ethan were tucked away in a closet, a wedding photo, his favorite sweater, and the notebook she could never bring herself to discard. She avoided mirrors. Looking at her reflection felt like facing her sins. Her once vibrant eyes now seemed dull, hollowed out by the weight of guilt she carried. At work, she maintained a quiet existence. Her colleagues learned quickly not to ask about her past. "She's private," they would say, mistaking her silence for mere reserve. Only Lily knew the truth. Her isolation was a self-imposed penance. Years passed, and the world outside continued to move on, indifferent to the storm inside her. Lily tried to find meaning in small acts of kindness. She volunteered at a local shelter, helping others in an attempt to atone for the life she had ruined. It was at the shelter that she met Grace, a widowed woman in her 60s who radiated warmth despite her own grief. "You carry something heavy," Grace said one afternoon as they sorted donations. Lily looked up sharply. "What makes you say that?" Grace smiled gently. "I see it in your eyes. You've lost someone, haven't you?" Lily hesitated before nodding. "Yes," she said softly. Grace reached out, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "Sometimes the only way to heal is to forgive yourself." The words lingered with Lily long after she left the shelter that day. Forgive herself. The idea felt impossible, like asking the tide to reverse its course. That evening, Lily opened the box containing the letter she had written to Ethan years earlier. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink smudged from the tears she had cried while writing it. She read the words slowly, each sentence a painful reminder of her regret. "I hope you've found peace," she had written. But had she? Something stirred inside her, a faint spark of resolve. She retrieved a pen and began to write again, this time addressing herself. "Lily," she wrote, her hand trembling, "you have lived in the shadow of your mistakes for too long. Ethan wouldn't want this for you. You can't bring him back, but you can honor his memory by living a life he would have been proud of." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of a future, one where her grief didn't define her. On a crisp autumn morning, Lily returned to the cliffside where she had scattered Ethan's ashes. The wind tugged at her scarf as she stood at the edge, the sea stretching endlessly before her. "I've carried you with me all these years," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I can't keep living like this. I have to let go, Ethan. I have to try." She closed her eyes, allowing the wind to whip through her hair as she imagined Ethan's face, his smile, his laugh, the way he had looked at her with so much love. When she opened her eyes, she felt lighter, as if the weight she had carried for so long had loosened its grip on her heart. Lily walked away from the cliff with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. Lily moved to a new city, where she began a modest life surrounded by strangers who didn't know her past. She took up painting, pouring her emotions onto the canvas in vivid strokes of color. Her works gained quiet acclaim in local galleries, her depictions of loss and redemption resonating with others in ways words never could. One day, as she prepared for her first solo exhibition, a visitor approached her. It was Grace, the woman from the shelter. "I told you forgiveness was possible," Grace said, her eyes twinkling. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. Though Ethan's memory would always remain with her, Lily had learned to live alongside her grief instead of letting it consume her. Her scars were part of her, but they no longer defined her. As the doors to the gallery opened and visitors began to filter in, Lily stood tall, ready to embrace the life she had reclaimed.